Today, we have a brilliant guest who works at the intersection of AI, data, and human behavior, helping organizations understand why people make the choices they do.
Whether it is figuring out what do we want to watch on Netflix or what do we buy on Amazon, we know that AI is running the show. Can you help our audience unpack the mechanics behind this? Like, is AI just tracking, let's say, our preferences, or is it also tracking actual human behavior?
I'd say AI uses both, but it's heavily weighted towards actual behavior. Even if the final click is up to you, you have control over that. The path up to that click has been picked out for you. So I carried out research for the European Commission pre-pandemic. Over 90% of the websites personalize the ranking of products to shoppers.
Can you share some examples with us where brands are actually using AI to nudge us or our behavior?
The AI should never make the final call.
Welcome to The Better Effect, the podcast where we explore the fascinating crossroads of behavioral science, technology, and decision making. Coming to you from the Center for Behavioral Insights at the Fortune Institute of International Business, I am Dr. Tavleen.
And hi, I am Dr. Sahiba Sahni. In today's episode, we are unpacking how AI systems are shaping the decisions we make every day, from what we watch to what we buy and believe, to the hidden biases embedded in algorithms and ethical questions around AI-driven nudges.
Today, we have a brilliant guest who works at the intersection of AI, data, and human behavior, helping organizations understand why people make the choices they do. With a PhD in econometrics and over 15 years of global experience, she transforms complex problems into actionable insights and strategies. Welcome to The Better Effect, Ashwini.
Delighted to be here.
We'll start with a very simple and most relatable example for our listeners and audiences of a use case of AI every day, which is recommender system. Whether it is figuring out what do we want to watch on Netflix or what do we buy on Amazon, we know that AI is running the show. But can you help our audience unpack the mechanics behind this? Like, is AI just tracking, let's say, our preferences, or is it also tracking actual human behavior?
So I'd say AI uses both, but it's heavily weighted towards actual behavior. In economics, we have two concepts: stated preference and revealed preference. Stated preference is what you say you like. So Oscar-winning documentaries, like nature programs, environmentally friendly products. Revealed preference is what the data shows you actually like, revealed by what you actually do, what you look at, what you listen to, what you buy. Supposing you're setting up your Netflix account. In the initial phases, before Netflix actually has behavioral data from you, it's collecting your stated preferences. So you might tell Netflix, show me serious documentaries, show me nature programs. And Netflix's algorithms will use that stated preference information as a starting point. But as time goes on, Netflix observes, okay, what do you actually watch? How long did you watch it? What do you hover over? What do you search for? That's behavioral data, revealing your true preferences, and tailor its recommendations based on that. And there's also contextual information. So do you binge watch reality TV after work or on a Friday night? Are there times that you prefer rom-coms or spooky films or, those Oscar-winning documentaries? All of that is used to build a richer picture of your state of mind, what you actually want, when you actually want it, really target to you.
Is it fair to say that AI understands me better than I understand myself?
Well, AI is observing what you actually do. You know what you actually do, but there's a little layer of what you'd like to be doing. So I wouldn't go so far, but I will say that AI is not necessarily married to the person you'd like to be.
Ashwini, you very beautifully put across, there's a difference between stated preferences and revealed preferences. And, you have spent over a decade advising global brands on exactly this kind of behavior or this kind of consumer insight. But there also could be a flip side to it. So can you share an example from your experience, where this insight actually flipped companies' understanding of their users?
Yeah, sure. So recently I was working on a project with a disruptive telecommunications brand. I won't say which, and I was trialing for them a new product ahead of launch. And we observed that in the onboarding journey, there was significant drop-off. Didn't really understand why from the survey data, because from all of the metrics that we were tracking and that my client was interested in, so like the like specific features of the journey, all of those seemed to be working well. They were intuitive, people understood them, tick marks everywhere. But that's obviously not the full story. So I used natural language processing to scrape the open text responses to see if there's something that's falling outside of what we're tracking. And there was. So there was an element of the journey, essentially, where you split up a booking over 2 separate occasions, which is non-standard, and it was really throwing off users. And there was actually an easy fix to this. I signpost to it up front, frame it as a feature rather than as a bug, and it reduced drop-off by over 50%, if memory serves. I think what this really ties into is a thing that I've learned from sometimes painful experience, which is that you can have all of the descriptive statistics, all of the p-values, all of the regression outputs in the world. They are not going to land a change, right? Stories land change. And what, in this case, the natural language processing allowed me to do was to find that story, that kind of rich, emotional, qualitative depth almost, but at quantitative scale. And that led to like a real flip in the understanding, I think, not only of the users, but of their own journey. It was like it was like engineering had characterized it in a particular way, and it's like, okay, we understand what's going on with this product, but that's not how the user sees it, and that's not. And I think it really flipped their understanding.
Actually, I understand, your passion, how you're answering these questions, but specifically to this previous question, can this answer be made in more easy language, which can be understood by our viewers and our listeners?
So without AI, right, we'd essentially have been trying to use survey data. What do people say they understand? It's getting back a little bit to the revealed preference versus the stated preference thing, but this is but this is linked a little bit more to their experience of a journey, to their understanding of a product or a feature or a journey, right? You might say you understand, you might think you understand, right? But there might be elements that are going on that subconsciously are kind of tuning you out, but you can't really pick up on what that is. Sometimes you can use something like qualitative research to kind of a little bit at that, sort of get under the skin of that. But that's not always going to be possible, and it's not always going to be possible at scale, right? So you're not going to be able to get like the big sample sizes that let you say, oh, this is a really robust finding. I'm finding this across lots of groups. I can really comb this. And what natural language processing lets you get beyond the surface of okay, this is what people say they understand. They say they understand, but look, there is this open text response that is pinpointing like an area of confusion. So there's something that we are not picking up on, and therefore we are not sort of coding and tracking, but there is some little emotional barrier that people are not able to frame in this nice sort of concise kind of way. But the natural language processing allows us to comb that and say, okay, there is some area of a doubt, a confusion, some emotional barrier that the natural language processing allows us to get at. And it allows us to analyze these things at large scale.
So, Ashwini, just to simplify it for our audience, it's basically usage of qualitative data in a large size. Usually when we talk about qualitative research, we are able to reach out to a handful of respondents. But because of the use of natural language processing, you are able to access qualitative data in large quantities. And hence, usually the limitation with qualitative data is that our inability to validate the data. It solves for this problem because of the size of sample that is available to you. And what I actually found really interesting was that how you identify the problem and took it back to the organization in terms of a framing solution. It was reframed as a feature rather than a bug, which is most interesting to future marketers or users of information that AI is able to generate. That was fascinating, and it actually shows that how AI can help us read between the lines of human behavior. But it also brings a very critical question. That if AI is anticipating our state of mind and putting specific choices right in front of us, is it fair to say that AI is actively nudging our decision making? Like, we're talking so much about AI governance and ethical AI. Is it even ethical for AI to monitor so much of our information and, put that exact thing in front of me as an advertisement, which I might just end up buying?
We can talk about the ethics, and I think that is a huge and very, very rich research field. Let's talk about the first bit, which is, is AI actually kind of, creating that choice for you? And the data does suggest this. Like it's essentially a supercharged choice architect. So we know the behavioral science principle of anchoring, right? How you feel about choices or information is dramatically different depending on what option you see first. Like even if you remind yourself consciously, right? And even if the final click is up to you, you have control over that. The path up to that click has been picked out for you. So I carried out research for the European Commission pre-pandemic, where we ran tests and we surveyed websites over like a range of different categories. And over 9/10 of the websites, over 90% of the websites, personalized the ranking of products to shoppers based on their access route to the website, their previous browsing history, their devices. And that is genuinely powerful, right? Because in which you see products, the products that are being made salient to you absolutely have an impact on which products you're going to buy. Right? Choices don't happen in a vacuum. Choices are always conditional depending on the set that you are shown. And AI is designing that set based on your past behavior. So absolutely, AI is generating those choices.
This is so beautiful. You said that AI even has access to the path that we use to reach to a click or a link. Can you elaborate a bit on that? And also, can you share some examples with us where brands are actually using AI to nudge us or our behavior?
For example, your path into the website, like this is very straightforward, but you might be shown like discount products closer to the top if your access point to the website was a price comparison website, like an aggregator of some sort. But otherwise, you might be shown more premium products towards the top if you were looking for the last thing you were looking at was luxury holidays or something like that, some indicator. Like I think in 2021 there was a bit of a scandal in the UK where it was discovered that identical flight tickets, were significantly more expensive depending on if you were browsing from a Mac compared to a PC. Right?
Yes.
Because you're basically being charged your willingness to pay. It's price discrimination.
I've even read if you're an Android user or iOS user, the prices are different.
Yes, absolutely, right? Because it is intuiting something about your willingness to pay from things like your devices, from your browser history, from all of these things. So even the price that you see for the same product might be completely different, completely independent of whether you are being steered towards different products with different prices, which is also happening.
And it actually kind of, leads us to biases, in that curation, in the curation of what AI gives us, because AI systems learn from our collective behavior. They pick up from human flaws. For instance, if you are to ask AI for an image of a beggar, statistically likely that it will generate an image of a person of an Asian descent rather than a white person, relying on, deeply flawed stereotypes that we humans hold. And if AI is dependent on what we give us, isn't AI inherently biased also?
Yes, and if it's left unsupervised, if there are no guardrails, then there are real harms that it can not only build on existing biases, but because it's learning from itself, exacerbate those biases, right? HR and recruitment were sort of early adopters and early pioneers of large language models. There are quite a few infamous cases. There's one which I suspect everyone's going to be familiar with by now, but it is a really valuable one where Amazon had to scrap and rethink its AI HR tech, because it was systematically penalizing women candidates. It was sort of systematically filtering out people with whose resumes had women's only colleges or had women's societies, things like that. Apple had a case where essentially sort of Apple Pay and credit penalized women borrowers. So Steve Wozniak, the co-founder, found that his credit limits were significantly higher than his partners, even though they have joint accounts, joint income. Their income is the same. So AI systematically sort of penalizes sort of in terms of credit limits women, even though their credit scores might be better, even if their income is higher. All of that's based on historical decisions. And it can get, I think, even more serious than that. There was a Nature article last year where there was an AI that was used for cancer diagnoses that was misdiagnosing, say, African American patients versus Caucasian parents, because its training data was comprised primarily of Caucasian patients. So its training data was based on lighter skinned people. So it didn't perform as well with darker skinned people. It mischaracterized cancerous skin lesions on darker skinned patients as benign. And that's clearly serious. Skin cancers tend to have a very good prognosis if they're detected early. But late detection can obviously be fatal. So that's a little range of areas, but it's, as with any sort of very data-intensive model, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? Yeah. So what matters is its assumptions. What matters is the data. What matters is the guardrails. And there's a really interesting field right now, which is kind of about coming up with, essentially thinking about ways to optimize AI model evaluation, sort of thinking about how to audit AI model evaluations, kind of like you would a balance sheet, kind of like you would a financial statement, but it's also like stress testing it, trying to break the AI model. There's a lot of discussion right now about the best ways or the best combination of ways to audit and stress test the classifiers and AI models. Like, should you use benchmarking data? Should you use human judgment? There are some LLMs that are increasingly more sophisticated. So it's almost like, do you think of the LLMs as judges? So it's a very, very interesting area, and one that I think is extremely ripe for behavioral science thinking, because since AI inherits a lot of human biases, you need a human being who understands human biases to instruct the AI on what to look out for.
So our jobs are safe.
I would think so.
I think we can say that AI is as biased as the master who's feeding the algorithm.
Yeah.
And there's a beautiful series that I'm reminded of on Netflix, which is Humans in the Loop, where AI detects an insect as a pest, where in reality it's not a pest, it's a healthy
Yeah.
insect, and the human is forced to code that insect as a pest. Right. So Ashwini, a lot of our
Yeah.
viewers, they are really not data scientists, right? But they are using AI left, right, center every day. These could be any tools from ChatGPT to Gemini or to Claude. So how can our viewers, how can they be cautious of these biases in their own work?
I think a starting point for this is almost, how do you retain your own integrity? How do you challenge your own thinking, right? Because I think as we use LLMs more and more, the question is almost more about, how do you challenge yourself? How do you keep yourself honest? There are a few things that you should make sure to do to sort of stress test the AI, but also stress test your own thinking. And the first is, do what you can to avoid confirmation bias, right? Because as human beings, we tend to prefer to seek out information that confirms what we already kind of think. With conversational models, with LLMs, especially as you build up a bit of a history with them, right? The large language model is always going to want to reach for the statistically obvious option, right? And the statistically obvious option is also going to be informed by its path with you, its history with you, right? Mm-hmm. So there is a real risk of confirmation bias. Like, there's a risk that it tells you what you quote unquote want to hear. How do you challenge that? So ask it to consider a range of perspectives, which again, I think is a great idea, a great challenge even for human thinking. The second, a big issue with LLMs is that it is trained on a set of data which tends to be quite biased. It's not just LLMs, but a lot of empirical behavioral science literature as well is based on what they call weird countries, sort of Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. And those countries are actually a minority that's actually a relatively small fraction of the population of the whole world. So even in behavioral science, right, a lot of our thinking does not take things like culture into account. It may not take ethnicity into account. It may not take a lot of things into account. So again, I think that's a challenge for an LLM. It's like, okay, now what if this person were a different gender? What if they were a different ethnicity, a different religion, a different country, something, sort of challenge it, force the LLM to challenge its own model assumptions. The final thing is, sort of responding a little bit to the human in the loop, is that the AI should never make the final call. I was talking about using natural language processing earlier, and that's super useful in lots of ways, but I did also have a human researcher layer. That's crucial because large language models, natural language processing, it works really well with high frequency events, it works very well with the average, right? It doesn't do all that well with unusual events, with unusual occurrences. So that's really where the human being comes into their own, right? That's where your own intuition, your own judgment, your own empathy, all of that, that's where you really find the insight and the good judgment. The human needs to make the final call.
So Ashwini, we've talked a lot about how AI is biased and how AI is also nudging to act us in certain ways, but not all nudges are bad. Especially when we talk in the context of social marketing, where governments and regulators bring nudges into place to bring positive change in human behavior for public benefit. These are the kind of places where nudges are useful. Have you ever seen data and AI being used at that level to drive high impact positive changes in how citizens behave?
The thing is that a nudge can be like, it's a good nudge or a dark nudge, right? And in the same way, ultimately what AI is really good at is personalization, hyper-personalization, right? Really laser targeting messages, experiences, journeys, and that lets you supercharge nudges. So, for example, policymakers often use social proof, right, to encourage pro-social behavior, right? So we want to do what people like us are doing. And so, for example, the UK government used social proof to get people to pay taxes on time. So it's like 9 out of 10 UK citizens pay their taxes on time. You can use similar things to encourage people to get people to cut down on water use. So, for example, in hotel rooms, you had they ran randomized control trials of signs asking you to please put away your towel back on the rack instead of just leaving it on the floor, because then that gets picked up and washed, and that takes up a lot of water, right? So they tried just signs saying, please put back your towel, and signs that said, 8 out of 10 people who stayed in the same hotel room put away their towels, and the social proof message was significantly more powerful. So the nudge existed, right? People have been trying nudges for a while, but AI lets you, supercharge them by making them both hyper-targeted, but also using real-time data. So, for example, there's ongoing research right now with data on using sort of smart meters to encourage sort of off-peak use. And and regulators use real-time energy consumption to show you how much energy a household is using compared to other households in the neighborhood. So then, and you have like a little smiley face or a little frowny face. And so you want to catch up with other people in your neighborhood, or you want to even surpass them in energy consumption. So it kind of makes it so it makes it real time and hyper targeted. And it doesn't just make it feel relevant to you, it can also make it feel timely, right? Because it can do things like, track the cadence of visits to the pharmacist by sort of piggybacking on what it knows about your existing behavior to say, oh, hey, you need to top up your meds, or book a health check. So there are absolutely, a nudge is not in and of itself virtuous or vicious, right? And similarly, it's all really in the use of it. It's a way of using data to make it timely, relevant, and easy for you to do what is best for yourself, for the society, for the planet.
I love the electricity example. I am bad with turning off lights and fans. And if I were to get a nudge that my neighbor has saved this much electricity in comparison to me, I think I'll be more mindful of turning off all the appliances when not in use. But these are all, extremely lovely examples of how AI is actually having an impact on our decisions in real time. It was a lovely conversation with you, Ashwini. We really enjoyed it.
And thank you, Ashwini. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of The Better Effect. And to our viewers and listeners, stay tuned until we meet you next.